What's a book that completely fucked you up after reading, or that you couldn't even finish? Lolita. No need to explain why. Edit. It was very well written though. Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk. Particularly the short story, Guts. I fainted while reading it. I was always embarrassed about it until I learned he keeps a tally of people that also fainted. Mine is Le Chercheur de Me, by Steve Laflamme. I was in shock after what I read. My whole body was shaking and I never finished it. Even though I had a book report to write about it. Spoiler for genuine fucked up things greater than. He was describing in super detail the rape of a 9-year-old child by his own mother. Less than. None, but if I had to pick. Unwind by Neil Schusterman. It. The part where Beverly takes all of the losers into the sewers and has an orgy with all of them. I cannot watch both movies without thinking about that part. The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It is extremely well written, but just so hard to get through. Metamorphosis by Shindo L. The amount of times I've tried to fully read this have escaped me. I feel so sad for the main character and a deep dislike of the rest of the people she encounters. The sad truth is this probably happens a lot more than what we would like to think about. The Art of Racing in the Rain begins with the dog dying. Flashes back to a lifetime of the dog nearly dying. And ends with the dog dying again. It's just the worst thing. Night by Elie Wiesel. There's plenty that disturbed me about that book, given its context. But the thing that bothered me most was when Elie can hear an older man yelling for his son, who he thinks is lost except he wasn't lost. Elie saw the son abandon his father while they were marching, for fear that his father might slow him down. That scene stayed with me for a very long time. The hot zone when you get to the end and find out it's a true story. If that doesn't totally chill your turds. The end tells you just how close we are to dying each day due to a hazardous biological incident. It took me quite a while to finally finish the book. The Never-Ending Story. It seemed like it never ended. Very ironic. I never did finish it. But then I was only like 10 or 11 at the time I tried to read it. Or so I think. Normally I liked, and still do read longer books, but this one never got me hooked. I can't remember the name of the book, even after Googling it, but it was about Albert Fish. https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/albert_fish. I think I was in my early teens when I read most of it. Do yourself a favor and just don't. That link is to his wiki entry. And it's more than gruesome enough by itself. I wouldn't recommend reading it either though. If you value sleep. I hadn't thought of that book in years. But when I read the thread title, his name instantly exploded in my mind. The Road. I've never felt existential dread like I did while reading that novel. And I've read Lolita and the 120 Days of Sodom without blinking an eye. Johnny Got His Gun as a close second. The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath always messes me up pretty bad. Don't read it if you deal with suicidal feelings, ideation. It starts out strong and then takes a turn about midway through. Brave New World made me feel really awful after I was done with it. It's an amazing book. It also really scares me with all the parallels I can draw between the world it describes and our own. House of Leaves did a solid job of getting under my skin. Plenty of holes to go down with the endless footnotes and insane formatting. I still find it enjoyable. But it is a reading experience like no other I've encountered. American Psycho. It was abhorrent. The guy reveled in his hatred toward others. I decided at that point that I don't ever want to know the thoughts of a killer. 1,000 Splendid Suns, such a good book, but very sad. I read American Psycho in high school after I watched the movie. Holy shit, is it different tone than the movie. There were parts in the book that legit made me nauseous. It's been over 20 years since I've read it. And those sections are still clear in my mind, and I have never felt the desire to read it again. Not completely fucked up, but definitely the strongest reaction I've had to a book. I had to go sit in the same room as my wife after reading the lawnmower part of Misery. I kept reading it but just didn't want to be alone in that moment. Marabou Stork Nightmares by Irvine Welsh was really disturbing. I think I donated it after finishing it because I didn't even want to have it around anymore and didn't feel comfortable giving it to anyone I knew. Just seeing the cover makes me uncomfortable even now. Brave New World also really messed me up for a long time. I think it's chapter 21 or 23 in IT, where the kids have sex with Bev, also a kid, in the sewer. I'm not going to specify the book. But there's a scene that involves a small child graphically reenacting sexual abuse only to realize that she's gotten her abuser in trouble and is terribly distraught about it. This is a scene I have lived. And it had me fucked up. The Losers by David Eddings. Years later and I still need to cry when I think about it. The Painted Bird by Jerzy Kosinski. People cite The Road as dark. But I found this book to be much worse. After reading The Painted Bird, I feel like we kinda deserve the ending The Road predicts. I managed to finish the book but after a bit of a break. Stephen King's It. There's just one god-awful scene that was left out of the movies for obvious reasons. Spoiler alert. Leave it to Stephen King to get away with writing a story about kids having an orgy. A novel about the Balkans by Slavenka Drakulic. Based on the stories of survivors of the Yugoslav wars in the 90s. Extremely disturbing rape scenes. I read it over 10 years ago and I had nightmares. Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. Had a 7th grade social studies teacher recommend it. The Amber Spyglass by Philip Pullman. I was messed up for weeks after I read the parts leading up to the ending. House of Leaves did an absolute number on me. I couldn't sleep for weeks. Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. Such a descent into real hell. Usually I like fucked up westerns. But this was too real. Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. It was 85% boring. Poorly written nothing. And then 15% intense, horrible, very descriptive rape. I never read any of the sequels. Sorry, Stieg. The Pianist. My bookmark is still there 17 years after putting the book down because I couldn't bear to read another page. Reading about the Holocaust just breaks me. Killing Stalking. After a certain chapter, I had to take a shower. I felt that dirty and disgusted. Requiem for a Dream fucked me up. I was a mess for weeks when I finished it. 172 Hours on the Moon. I will never be the same. It's great though, you should read it. Less Than Zero by Bret Easton Ellis. Worse things happen in America. Psycho. But the main character there is an adult and the one doing the horrible things. Most of the characters in Less Than Zero are 18 or younger. Act like children and are the victims. I read Clockwork Orange in a psych ward while dealing with serious mental illness issues. It wasn't so much the book as much of the context around me and within me in life during that time. I read it later and it wasn't quite so bad. But in there it really hit me heavily and disturbed and bothered me. But I stuck it out and finished it anyways because it seemed like an appropriate place and time in my life to read it. Push by Sapphire. The movie Precious was based on this book. I have no desire to see the movie after reading the book. As much as people will lambaste me for it. The first book in Game of Thrones. I couldn't finish it. The glorified rape, incest, abuse, selling the main girl to a warlord as a child sex slave, forced wife. Just, no. After a point it literally made me physically ill to read it. So I had to stop. And no, I haven't watched the show. And have no desire to. If I want my high fantasy kick, I prefer Wheel of Time. The History of Bees. Man, that book began promising. But after a while I couldn't see where it was heading to. And man, that Chinese kiddo was so annoying. Carrion Comfort. Dan Simmons, The Kindly Ones. Jonathan Little, Se Questo e un uomo. Primo Levi. I read the first two when I was around 12. And finished them both. But they definitely fucked me up. The one by Primo Levi. I had to read for my Italian class in high school. The Assistant by Bernard Malmed. Super fucking depressing, and a certain scene that happened to the main character's daughter just messed with me. The Art of Racing in the Rain. It's about a dog. We'll just leave it at that. Story of O. It didn't mess me up. It's more like I was really annoyed and frustrated with the whole experience. I couldn't understand the main character at all. Tiffany D. Jackson. 2 books. Monday's Not Coming and Allegedly. They both got me. I guess it's a short story, so maybe it doesn't fit, but surprised that no one has mentioned Survivor. Type by Stephen King. It's up there with Palahniuk's Guts. Jane Teller. Nothing was hard for me to finish, just brutal. Started reading as a meme, but Black Future. God-awful middle-aged sexual fetish. Good for laughs. On the Muslim Question, by Anne Norton. Takes a closer look at the goings-on of the Middle East and shows how hard it is to start a democracy in a country that both wants it but hates those supplanting it. I'd read the book Jon Stewart adapted to film first, Rose Water. The best reason I could describe why is it gets you hipped deep into the cold waters of all the things going on over there. Anne Norton's book more or less would be a full dive.